Yeah, no, my voice tends to fill the room. People have been known to leave the room to make room for my voice upon occasion. This comment, economics be damned, was my response to some pushback I got in a keynote that I was asked to give recently, and I thought it might be good for this forum. I don't know whether you've ever seen this slide before. You saw it earlier today when Per Stenster made his presentation. Although it had color, yellow and all this other good stuff. And my slides are more like what used to be overhead transparencies. In fact, Sanjay Patel, you remember when he was a student, he says that I'm amazing. I've taken this rich PowerPoint and reduced it to overhead transparencies. And the idea of the slide is that you express problems in natural language, but it's really the electrons underneath that actually do the work. And if I could only speak electron, I could go up to the machine and say, hey, electrons, do this problem, and the electrons would salute and go and do the problem. I can't, and so I go through this sequence of transformations. Now, historically, Moore's law has continued to give us more and more transistors. More and more transistors means a microarchitecture can do more and more fancy things. More and more transistors because the transistors keep getting smaller and smaller, which means the switching time of the transistor is faster and faster, which means that the frequency at which you can run the chip is faster. So you have more transistors that can do more stuff running at a faster clock. And so if you want to be lazy at the algorithm layer or the software layer, you can and not have to worry because the microarchitecture will save your butt. And that's the past. My message today in one slide, the microarchitecture provides performance. Software, in the old days, can count on a stable interface, the ISA, as long as Moore's law keeps giving us more transistors to do more stuff, faster transistors because they're small, so that I can get more done per unit of time. What if Moore's law does not continue? We want to continue to improve performance. Then we need to break the layers, as Per has already pointed out earlier today, which could have dire economic consequences because industry will not step up if there's no profit to be made, to which I say economics be damned. So that's the talk in one slide. If you want to stick around, I've got a few more slides. What I want to do today is spend a minute on Moore's law, not more than a minute, because I hope that those of you sitting here know Moore's law, but just to keep us all together. Some thoughts on paradigms. Paradigms are these things that people invent in order to get performance, and they evolve, as you'll see momentarily. In fact, the paradigm that Trevor left out from the Google chip, systolic arrays. So it's not just the 64,000 multiplies, but the way they stream the data a la H.T. Kuhn 1979.
I never understood what it's another repackaging. Okay.
Another repackaging? No,
No
you
such
got
thing as just a clock to write.
near neighbor communication.
Okay.
If you stream the data
No, there's nothing.
through it.
You do a Mac and then you send it all the way around and do it again. Anyway. Okay.
You want me to pick on the rest of your time? What the hell, why not? You made the comment that you can enumerate all cases.
No,
In fact,
I said it might possibly be the case.
so it absolutely cannot be the case because the dimension n is so large that the domain space is too huge to be able to do all cases, which, by the way, is why neural networks are scary things. Because that case that you didn't enumerate when you set the weights is the case that drives the car into the side of the truck rather than allowing you to do the corrective action. So, some thoughts on paradigms, examples of paradigms and the way they have evolved, what we need to do moving forward, and how economics get into the title of this talk. Moore's Law, double the number of transistors on a chip every process generation. Not 18 months, Gordon Moore never said that, but that's another digression that I won't take today. And as I already pointed out, smaller transistors mean higher frequencies, more transistors means more functions to be able to be done in parallel. Is it about to end? Everybody says Moore's Law is about to end, and they might be right. They may also be wrong. And so that bullet I put in something resembling red, and I've put into my talk today a few such bullets. It's sort of extra something or other in my talk that I just wanted to leave you with. This concept that Moore's Law is about to end, and everybody says so, and I'm not saying it's not going to end. What I am saying is we have seen so many cases where engineering ingenuity tends to violate the conventional wisdom that don't be surprised if Moore's Law continues longer than we think. You know, the FinFET, for example, you don't put a transistor this way, you stand it on its end. Makes Moore's Law last a little bit longer. What else is down the road? I don't know. But I've been around a long time, and I've been hearing the end of Moore's Law every 5 years for the last 40 years. Moore's Law was fine for its time, but
we do know that we can't keep cutting things in half. We'll split
so therefore we need to, that we do know that. We do know that. So when I talk about the feature size, I never use the word 7 nanometers. Why? Because you can't wrap your brain around the nanometer. What I say is 70 angstroms. Because everybody took high school chemistry, they know you measure atoms and molecules in angstroms. And so yeah, you cannot keep making it smaller and smaller. Maybe there's something else that you can do. Do I know what that is? No. But when you're going to write finite to anything, where engineers are going to address it, be careful. And meanwhile, by the way, Moore's Law has enabled quite a bit since it started, since the microprocessor started in 1971. I've got a list there, and I don't propose to go through them. I'm happy to deal with any one of them if anyone wants, but right now I need to move on. What will Moore's Law ending mean? If in fact it does, no more faster transistors, no more increase in the number. We won't even be able to power them all on at the same time. So how do we stay on the performance curve? Paradigms provide new ways to do things. Importantly, they provide performance. They're invented to satisfy needs and problems, and they often create new needs and problems, so they give way to newer paradigms. So I should give some examples of paradigms. So I figured I'd pick 3 very old paradigms. Been around forever. Approximate computing, machine learning, and quantum computing. My example of very old paradigms. With the proper context, of course. Floating point, that's been around forever. As Trevor brilliantly pointed out, is to make life for the programmer easy.
This is not approximate computing.
I'm sorry?
The floating point is not an approximate computing.
Of course it is.
No.
Of course it is.
You don't change at the
Of
time.
course it is.
At the time you are running application.
6.023
It's a fix.
times 10 to the 23. If you write it out, it's 6023 0000000. Are they really zeros? Of course they're not really zeros. It's approximate computing.
I don't think. It's an approximation to the computer.
Professor Valero.
The validity of approximation.
I know you don't think so. You've been wrong before. Machine learning, as I told you yesterday in the beach note, the original back in the late 50s, early 60s, actually before you were an undergrad. There were 3 projects going on, I mentioned them, Monday, Adeline, Perceptron, and, Karlsruhe Steinberg's learning matrix. They were the first instances of machine learning. And quantum computing, there'll never be a quantum computer.
You said never.
There will never be a quantum computer. I do not see a quantum computer fetching and decoding instructions. There will be a quantum accelerator, and they're already in progress of being developed. And accelerators is an old idea, starting with the floating point unit, which used to be a separate co-processing chip when we didn't have enough transistors to stick it on the main chip. So here's some examples of paradigms. Tomasulo. There were good things about Tomasulo. Out of order execution. There was bad things. It broke the ISA. Data flow is good. Exposes all the possible parallelism that you could do. Bad things. Much too unwieldy for too many reasons. HPS, our work. CDC 6600.
What's bad about HBS?
I don't know, actually. The control data 6600, which you correctly say Burton gives credit to the multi-threading. I don't give credit to the 6600. I think it's really great.
IO unit, which was actually designed by SAMOS.
I'm well aware of that. SMT, what was good, what was bad. SIMD, GPU, systolic array. All these paradigms that have come about to solve problems, create new problems, and then give way to newer paradigms. With, by the way, some assists in the microarchitecture, and I've listed several: branch prediction, wide issue, predicate execution, extra memory pipes, and in the ISA. Again, predicate execution, unaligned access, register windows, delayed branches. And since I've listed these assists that are in there to help the paradigm, I need to give you my second little advice to be careful. When you add something to the microarchitecture, there's no problem. If you don't like it, you just throw it away on the next generation of that ISA. If you add something to the ISA, you're stuck with it forever. So if you come up with this brilliant idea that you want to add to the ISA, take a nap. When you wake up, you may think better of it. Examples of paradigm evolution, and I've got several here, and I'm trying to whip through them quickly. HPS, which, Trevor, you agree there's nothing bad about HPS. So HPS comes about by Tomasulo and data flow coming together. As I said, Tomasulo had out of order execution, didn't have precise exceptions. It also only worked with a floating point unit, it only had one micro-op per instruction, and it also stalled on a branch. Data flow, tons of micro-ops, terrific, the parallelism. Too unwieldy, hard to take interrupts, hard to debug. So what did HPS do? Took the good, threw away the bad, added some assists, and so what assists? In order retirement, restricted data flow, wide issue, aggressive branch prediction, speculative execution, a new paradigm is born. SMT, where'd that come from? So I guess, yeah, so I have that bullet in there actually CDC 6600 before the HEP, and that's in because Burton says so. HEP plus out of order execution gives you SMT. And then SMT, where the application space only has one thread, gives you SSMT. HEP was brilliant. In fact, one of the reasons I admire Burton so much. Way ahead of his time. Your date is wrong. It wasn't 82, it was before that. In fact, by 82, they were already in production. I thought, wasn't that your slide, or was that Louise's slide? Maybe it was Louise. Somebody had PEP 1982. It was earlier than that. In fact, his spy paper was 5 years before that. But it only issued one instruction each clock cycle. And then, so SMT, and I've given the references, SMT was invented by a Japanese guy named Hirata, published in ISCA, our architecture conference in 1992. If you have any question about where SMT came from, get a hold of the ISCA proceedings of 1992, look at figure 2, remove all doubt. SMT is Hirata. But what if we only have one thread? Then SSMT, which came out of my group, published in ISCA in 99, but really was done earlier by Michel Dubois at USC, who published it in an internal USC technical report. Nobody reads technical reports, so everybody gives us the credit. There are some clowns that came up with this term, helper threads, which is what SSMT is. And they deserve credit for coming up with the name, helper threads. And Michelle and maybe my group deserve the credit for coming up with the concept. Michelle and I did it independently. While he was producing the internal technical report, we were submitting it to ISCA. The reason I belabor that point is another one of my bullets, which I guess I didn't make a red thing underneath, which is you say, wow, I did SMT. I did SSMT. I said, no. Michelle also did SSMT. Anytime you think you're the only smart person in the room, take a nap. When you wake up, you may have a second chance at it. And there are plenty of examples of people taking credit for being the only one, where in fact they weren't the only one. There are ideas whose time has come, and multiple people come up with that idea at the same time. GPU. So if you understand SIMD, and if you understand SMT, and if you understand predicated execution, 3 paradigms, then you understand the GPU. And now my orange comes into play. GPUs work if the software can pay attention to branches. When you take branches with a GPU, you're in trouble. Branch divergence, and all of a sudden you're working at half the speed, and within this thread, another branch before you hit a merge point. Now you're working at a fourth the speed. So the software has to know about branches to make that work. And the software also needs to know about memory accesses, because if the memory is not coalesced properly, then those lanes of the SIMD engine are going to be colliding, and you're going to run sequentially through those SIMD lanes. So GPU is great if the software takes care of it. VLIW. Horizontal microcode is what gave us VLIW. Not good for general purpose computing, but it is good for domain specific stuff, which is why you see it in the DSP chip, for example, or why you see it in microcode emulation of instruction set. That is DSP chip. When the software is known in advance and you can construct the software, then VLIW makes a whole lot of sense. Spatial computing. And a company has already been mentioned. I won't continue that. But spatial computing is simply systolic arrays plus FPGAs. Spatial computing, where you can stream the data through this data flow graph, which you have implemented with an FPGA. And because you can keep all the operations of the data flow graph busy all the time, you get enormous speed up. H.D. Cook, I mentioned earlier, 1979. Not enough transistors to really do the full job. FPGAs come along a lot later with a lot more transistors. His work was much too ASIC. Today we can stream data through the data flow graph, if the software can produce the data flow graph. So you come up with a procedure-oriented program. How do you compile that to a data flow graph? Not easily, if the software can construct the data flow graph. multi-core, many-core. So when did that come about? In the early days, in the 80s, we had multi-core on the chip. In fact, David W. Shaw's non-bond, a million processors. In his engine, each chip had 16 processors. Didn't have very many transistors, so the data path of the non-bond chip was 1-bit data. So the early days, I mentioned non-bond, the Boolean vector machine, the connection machine, CM1. Data path was 1 bit, but they had 16 cores on a single chip. Not enough transistors in 1985, so you had a 1-bit data path. We still have the problem. How do you program this thing? The software. And most importantly, I think, is the whole business of accelerators. And there are many implementation mechanisms available to implement the accelerators, ASICs, FPGAs. I love, one of my favorite ISAs was the old PDP-11. It had this EMT instruction. This was back in the days of microcode. And if you wanted to add another function, an accelerator, to your system, what you did is you wrote the microcode to handle that function, and then the EMT instruction would vector you into the control store, and you could do it. Examples of accelerators. And today we have quantum computing and machine learning. Requires the attention of the person writing the algorithm, the programmer converting it to code, the compiler writer converting it to the ISA of the chip, and the microarchitecture providing the structure on the chip that will carry it out. So yeah, accelerators is clearly the future, but all these people along my transformation hierarchy have to contribute to making it happen. As Moore's Law finally ends, we'll have to think smarter. That will mean bringing to the table everybody on the transformation hierarchy. In case you've forgotten, that's what the transformation hierarchy looks like. In my view, accelerators will play a big role, but they will need CPUs to feed them. You know, accelerator by itself, no. In fact, when you do this, the TPU, the tensor processing unit is an accelerator. It needs to be fed. And I appreciate your other slide where you said, hey, you really should compare it against a more current GPU. But the GPU is also an accelerator and needs a CPU to feed it. Which means, another one of my side bullets, the von Neumann machine, not the von Neumann machine that von Neumann meant, which was the co-location of code and data in the same memory. Not the von Neumann machine as distinct from the Harvard architecture, but the von Neumann machine as we generally refer to it, which is this procedure-oriented fetch, decode, figure out the address, go get the data, store the data. That model of processing, which too many people say is dead, it will continue to thrive because it's the thing that produces order out of chaos and allows these accelerators to actually do. So when I say that you need to bring everybody to the table, I get enormous pushback. What about portability? And by the way, they're right. You do it my way, bring everybody to the table, portability goes out the window. Without portability, the economics isn't there, industry won't buy into it. My response, economics be damned. I believe there are things far more important than economics. Things that should not have a price tag, like curing cancer, like predicting tsunamis. Driverless cars that don't crash into the back of trucks or walls. Or lots of other things we will trust computers to do. Things that need much greater performance. That's my message. Things that need much greater performance. So that with Moore's Law ending, the software people can no longer be lazy because the microarchitecture can't give it to you. We've got to bring everybody to the table. And we already have existence proofs. The United States, the Department of Energy has been building supercomputers to control nuclear plants. Why? Because when a nuclear plant goes ballistic, bad things happen. So it's worth spending the money to do a supercomputer control the nuclear plant. David Elliott Shaw, who made billions on the stock market by providing software for the companies on the stock market in Wall Street in the U.S., then went off and spun off his research thing to come up with a machine, and portability out the window. He built one, he called it Anton, and he built that machine for understanding science because he wanted to have a machine that could actually simulate more than a nanosecond of time. He wanted to simulate real physics and chemistry going on for a large enough window that maybe scientists can look at the data and be able to improve science. In fact, when he first talked about it, I said, David, you do realize that when you end up with this machine, you're going to say, oh my God, I screwed up. Then what? He says, well, the good news is I have enough money, I'll just start over and do it again. So, economics be damned. I actually think that this recent Google thing, the tensor processing unit, which by the way handles the easy part of the neural network problem, not the training part, the inference part, is another one. So what else is there if we reject this economic thing that drives industry and says, oh, you know, if I can't make money, then I'm not interested. So my bottom line, portability be damned. If we can get performance by breaking the layers and making important headway on some very important problems, I think it's worth pursuing. I'm done.